Okay, year 11. This is the second part of power quotes. Now remember, these aren't all the power quotes. These are just some that I personally would use if I was writing an essay. If you have other ones or your teacher has given you other ones, revise those as well. So this one is a moment in the Battle of the Cowshed where physical power is shown. Without halting for an instant, Snowball flung his 15 stone against Jones's legs. Jones was hurled into a pile of dung and his gun flew out of his hands. But the most terrifying spectacle of all was Boxer, rearing up on his hind legs and striking out with his great iron-shod hooves like a stallion. So you've got this idea of like an explosion of physical power, yeah? 15 stone, that's a, it's a fact, it's a weight, it's heavy, 15 stone. You've got a lot of powerful verbs like hurled and gun flew out of his hand. So the symbol of power that he could kill them is thrown from his hands in this explosive act. And then you've got the idea that the most terrifying spectacle, so these adjectives, terrifying, yeah, and the abstract noun spectacle. Boxer, he's rearing up and striking out like a stallion. The connotation of a stallion is like a knight would ride on, kind of to fight a dragon or something. He's so powerful, and perhaps at this point you've got Napoleon realizing that this power needs to be controlled. It's a high point, it's the explosion, it's the revolution, it's sudden structurally, it's explosive, and yet there are some negatives. You've got the idea that Boxer kills by accident. He actually kills one of the men by kicking him. He doesn't want to, and this could tie in with the idea of during revolutions, often war crimes and things are committed by the most unexpected of people, and it's the result of desperation, it's the result of propaganda. It's not going to be the people at the top getting their hands dirty. Yeah, so they might think they're defending themselves against an awful corrupt person, and they shoot someone who's just an enemy of the leader but was actually harmless. I mean, if you think about the Tsar and his children were not very intelligent, inbred children. They're not a threat to anyone, and yet they thought if they survived, the monarchy could come back, and they execute them. The people that did that would not have envisaged themselves as child killers. It was the people behind them that had prompted them to do that. And that's why Boxer, ends up killing without fully understanding. You've also got the subtle point in terms of what motivates the pigs. This is amazing explosion of power, these verbs with things like striking out, flung, his gun flew out of his hands. You've got that simile, great iron-shod hooves like a stallion. So they're like superheroes. How are you going to control that once you've got it? You get rid of the old boss. Now how are you going to control it? If you're Snowball, you can do that by moral purpose and being convincing. But how are you going to do that if you're Napoleon? And there's a little subtle point there about why he's corrupt, about he's got so much power. How is he going to deal with that? Yeah, if he hasn't got the talents of Snowball and Old Major. So there you have a subtler point, perhaps more sophisticated point than just he's greedy, as to why he takes charge. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, so this is a little bit about language. You've got discussion about the windmill just before Snowball is driven out. Then Napoleon stood up to reply. He said very quietly that the windmill was nonsense and that he advised nobody to vote for it, and promptly sat down again. He had spoken for barely 30 seconds and seemed almost indifferent as to the effect produced. At this, Snowball sprang to his feet, again this kind of idea of Snowball's always jumping, and shouting down the sheep, who had begun bleating again, broke into a passionate appeal in favour of the windmill. Until now, the animals had been about equally divided in their sympathies, but in a moment, Snowball's eloquence had carried them away. So you've got a lovely metaphor there. His eloquence, that means, the way he speaks, had carried them away and lifted them on his journey. So you've got this beautiful idea that in terms of true leadership, well-used words should carry the people to follow the leader. But then you can look at the flip side of that is Squealer and his propaganda. You've also got, look at those verbs. You've got the alliteration of began bleating. So that immediately infantilizes the sheep. Infantilizes is basically when you call someone a baby. Began bleating. Yes, it's a sheep, but it's a babyish, stupid noise to make. So their status is immediately lowered. And you've got this idea of Snowball here being powerful, and you're thinking, he's amazing, he's great, he's so convincing. Napoleon's not, we know he's not good with words, but he's not even bothered by that anymore because he's found a solution. There's an immediate foreshadowing. What is his solution? He's got attack dogs. So violence is working to overpower true passion, true moral fervour, true use of eloquence. Violence overcomes it. It's that kind of irony. Oh, the pen is mightier than the sword. Is it? Orwell's being quite bleak here. He's kind of suggesting that perhaps it isn't. Perhaps everything you do for good, if someone's got attack dogs, if someone's got a gun, you're powerless. It does link back to the Battle of the Cowshed, because no matter how clever Squealer's 15 stone of pig is, ultimately it's Boxer, the violent one, in that case, he wasn't deliberately being violent, that wins it. Well, it doesn't matter how convincing Squealer is. Ultimately, it's Napoleon's attack dogs that drive him and his voice out. Okay, and then we've got here a bit about the corruption of power. It was about this time the pigs suddenly moved into the farmhouse and took up their residence there. It was absolutely necessary, he said, that the pigs, who were the brains of the farm, should have a quiet place to work in. It was also more suited to the dignity of the leader, for of late he had taken to speaking of Napoleon under the title of leader, to live in a house than a mere sty. So you've got mere, yeah, so mere is low, it means basic, some low down sty. So you've got a couple of key words here I'd look at is the idea of dignity and brains. So doing the brain work is an exaggeration of truth. They are thinking. Okay, they're thinking nasty, greedy thoughts, but they are thinking. The other, dignity, is an abstract concept. What is dignity? What is dignity? Dignity comes from within. You don't have to be a leader to have dignity. But here, they're aligning dignity with grandeur. So like when you see a dictator and they've often got a military uniform on. Or if you see a king or a queen and they've got the robes on. They're saying the dignity comes from these external things, like the grandeur of being in a house rather than a sty. Is that true? It's very questionable. Yeah? Dignity surely comes from within. They are talking about grandeur. Apologies, the bell is going. And equally, you've got this idea of titles and words, and it ties in with this. He started calling himself a leader. Yeah? Is he acting like a good leader? No. Yeah? So that links back in the previous video to the idea of, instead of your behaviour making you good or bad, it's how many legs you've got. Yeah? Here, instead of his behaviour making him a leader and leading by example here, is the fact that he lives in a house and he has this dignity, this so-called dignity, which is actually, I would say, grandeur. So you've got a lot of links to elsewhere in the novel and these ideas of appearance and reality. Okay, there are many more quotes. Those are just some I'd use. I'll make some other videos. Put in the comments if you want any other videos about Animal Farm. And of course, if you could also subscribe, click like, let me know you're watching, and good luck with your exams.